Okay, thank you all. Hello, welcome to this session. So what I initially thought I would be doing in terms of revisiting socialist feminism in India, I changed a bit. Most of it is there, but in the schedule, what I thought that I wouldn't be going into is about the women directors post the 1990s. My area of looking at socialist feminism is a bit different. So I thought I would be able to read up by the time, we will be here, but okay. So here it is, the title, Revisiting Socialist Feminism in India, Theatre, Actress Lives, and Politics. So this is basically, my effort of trying to put together a chart of the way I would like to go about what I will be speaking today. So if we start with the British colonial history of 19th century, from 1870s to 1940s, that how socialist ideology and practice arrived and shaped itself and also shaped Indian politics in certain ways, on the one hand, and then there is the history of the public stage and the actress presence there. From the socialist ideology and practice, we go to the changing contours of women's issues, where we focus a little bit on nationalism and socialism, the interactions between nationalism and socialism, and women's activism within the socialist movements. And there, from the public stage and actress presence, we come to the cultural politics of gender. I hope in one way or other, I will be able to put them together in conversation and kind of pull them together into some kind of an argument which will emerge, hopefully. So some key points. I begin with 19th century Bengal, which is the area regional focus that I have been working on for some time. So that the first novelist of modern Bengali literature, if one can say that, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, in his 1879 long essay, Samya, which means equality, reflects the ways in which colonial intelligentsia engaged with the European ideas of socialism, communism, and social justice. In his appraisal of the Bengal Renaissance, Sushobhan Sarkar, who is a very renowned Marxist theorist and a historian, and who was also a member of the Communist Party of India for almost all his life, wrote that in spite of Bankim Chandra's commitment to Hindu tradition, this particular essay, Samya, betrays a distinctive influence of utopian socialism in his intellectual universe. And in 1871, a letter, these are kind of historical anecdotes, a letter reached the office of the International Working Men's Association, or the First International in London from Calcutta, requesting them to open a branch in Calcutta. In 1874, the first kind of labor journal, Bharate Shramojibi, Indian Worker, came out of a reformist, religious reformist movement, Brahmo movement. And Shoshipada Sarkar's journal kept on focusing on plantation workers that were emerging at that point of time in India, and published reports about the way the exploitation happened of the Indian workers in different parts of the country as well. They did guerrilla journalism and all kinds of things to expose the connection between capitalism and colonialism and how they functioned together. In 1876, an unknown translator published the first Bengali translation of the Communist Manifesto. So we can see that how almost, by 1870s, as it takes off, and let's remember that 1857 is the time when the huge Sepoy mutiny, or the first nationalist revolt, happens, and in 1858, India becomes the kind of part of the British Empire formally. The Queen takes over. So within 25 years of this takeover, there is another flow of political exchange that is also happening, which is socialism has started arriving along with colonial capitalism as well. So also, just to kind of recount very briefly that the first volume of the documents of the history of Communist Party of India includes documents confirming how a few Indian socialists traveled to Moscow in 1918, met Lenin, gave interviews to Russian newspapers, and finally established the first overseas communist organization for India in Tashkent in 1920. So let's remember, though the formal kind of establishment of the Indian Communist Party is regarded as 1925, but let's remember that such organizational efforts started happening, and there was an international edge to it from the beginning, quite early on, that this entire history of travel of socialist ideas kind of gives us a glimpse too. So Indian leaders like M.N. Roy, Manobendranath Roy, who was also a very significant member of the Second Communist International, Comintern, who had long debates with Lenin about how revolution can happen internationally and especially in the context of colonialism, into theorizing future people's revolution. So, we also see that how different strands of nationalist movements within India in the first half of the 20th century were turning towards socialist ideas. And there was a kind of, it's not only, let's remember that colonial India is part of a huge empire. It's kind of connected through continents. So there are all these connections that are available to explore for us to think about how socialism as an idea travels. So now if we kind of start focusing on the way today's ideas about linking these travels of socialism within India to the way we can think about socialist feminism in theater. So the way, again here, I have tried to give a bit of a history because I will come back to it again, but just to remind you that when in the first day, when Elaine was giving us the backdrop and some ideas about different strands of socialism, while also kind of drawing from Micheline Wonder, that socialist feminism has, of course, a concern about patriarchy, class and gender, but also race and sexuality. So this is my effort in a way to kind of push that within history, theater history, and see how race and sexuality actually have been part of the colonial patriarchy and the colonial modernity that created a certain kind of patriarchy. It's woven into that. So if we try to understand theater history, we cannot really escape not only how class and gender intersect, but also how race and sexuality intersect. And this is there already, so it may be useful for us just to take a little bit of kind of historical tour about it. So in 1775, the new playhouse was established, also known as the Calcutta Theatre in Calcutta, because 1775, the British East India Company had just arrived and became prominent in 1763, when they got the right to collect revenues from the Bengal Presidency. And they have started setting up their headquarters in Calcutta. And of course, with the merchants also came the entertainers. And they the whole colonial establishment in Calcutta started setting up its own entertainment district in certain ways. So the world of nightlife in late 18th century and early 19th century Calcutta shows that the spatiality of theater districts followed a hierarchy depending on the class positions of both performers and their patrons. So, of course, there are high echelons of British colonial officials, and where they go for their entertainment, and then there are lowbrow sailors who also are coming and also looking for certain kinds of entertainment. So theatre halls become the way that shapes up Calcutta's theatre district. And of course, I draw a lot from Bishnupriya, that's first book, Engendering Theatre Spaces. So the way she, that mapped the densely overlapping codes of respectability performances of European professional actresses on and off stage, and what the newspapers talked about, the way they were represented, is quite interesting because the space, race, and gender became very intersectional in the way the colonial space itself was being marked. So again, if you link it with the travels of the English actresses, and they were not only coming from England to India, but if you look at Indian oceanic entertainment trade and sex trade, the way different ports were attracting white working class women who were going out of England in search of different careers, there's a very close connection between sex work and entertainment industry. There are very interesting stories about the barmaids in different port bars held in Calcutta, and which bars had more beautiful barmaids coming from England. So there are different ways in which one can start mapping that story. So if that is one way of looking at the way race, sex, and entertainment became part of the way class and gender were intersecting with each other, then we go to the next phase, which is the 19th and early 20th century debates around the origin of actresses on the Bengali stage from red light areas was influenced by nationalist imagination of idealized femininity, conjugal domesticity, and the fear of female sexuality. So Tanika Sarkar, a very well-known historian of women and women, kind of gender relations, gender politics, argues that from kind of mid-19th century onwards, what starts happening is that the entire idea of reform comes to within the folds of the home. Home becomes the battleground because for the colonial Indian middle class who is working in British company, political establishment or the business establishments, there is very rarely any opportunity to express their Indianness and what they are learning as part of, say, for example, the travels of the socialist ideas that they are encountering. But when they are coming to their homes, the refashioning of the Indian womanhood becomes a huge concern. So domestic conjugality becomes one of the areas where patriarchy starts focusing on, and a new kind of what Partha Chatterjee has called the benevolent new patriarchy. That patriarchy is not oppressive in the most in-your-face explicit way, but rather nudging and shaping that this is how women should be, and this is their proper roles are. That of course, it is important to have an educated wife because you need to educate your children. So not women's education is necessary not because you expect them to go out and have a profession or a career, but rather because you need to educate your children. And happy and healthy home, that becomes quite an obsession in 19th century. So the combative and apologist voices of theater directors, actors, and playwrights confirm that the appearance of actresses originating from prostitute quarters on the stage and taking up roles of chaste wives becomes an area of particular anxiety. And again, drawing from Vishnupriya's work, I can say that this is the transition which becomes very interesting. The wayward bride of the scandalous plays to the chaste wives of social plays, to Bankim Chandra Chatterjee's heroines, the strong wives, to mythological characters of the goddess, to finally the muse of the nationalist iconography, the way the actress lives, the lives they led on stage unfolded. And the mise-en-scene of the such transformation were visual cultures associated with a particular kind of, this is a colonial form of painting, which is, drawing from a pre-colonial form, proliferation of literary journals, emergence of the novel as a literary form, and the growing appeal of conjugal domesticity as the national ideal. So the Dramatic Performances Act of 1876 is passed when this connection between nationalism and theater becomes quite close. And this, it's not in effect anymore. Actually, it has been repealed formally only in 2017. So this Dramatic Performances Act became a very draconian act that had to be resisted in certain ways. And very interestingly, in Calcutta stage, how resistance to 1876 Act shaped also the relationship between nationalism and theater has come up again and again on stage. And, what I can say is that, for example, during the first anti-partition agitation in 1905, how the folk theater form of Jatra incorporated certain strands to resist. Then, of course, nationalism and socialism also interacted through the new formations of progressive literary culture. And of course, if we come to the 1933 scandal in the Urdu literary sphere in northern India with the publication of 9 short stories written by 4 authors in a book called Angare, that kind of created a whole new generation of progressive writing and culture. So you can see that this is a kind of police department on the basis of the legal rule of obscenity. They confiscated every copy of Angare, and all of these socialist writers, including Rashid Jahan, a woman Urdu writer, and who came to be known also as an important literary figure in not only in the socialist circuits, but also in rereadings of feminist literary fiction as well. So she became a very interesting pivotal figure to understand socialist feminism, how it unfolded, also that she can be one figure of doing that. So as a result, the Progressive Writers Association comes into being in 1935 in London with Indian Mulk Raj Anand and Sajjad Jahir, the two pioneers kind of get together, and in Left Review, their first manifesto of the Indian Progressive Writers Association is published. So this is something I would like to kind of draw from Elaine, that if one is talking about left cultural practices, one really cannot avoid manifesto at all. Manifesto as a form, as a genre, is very interrelated with the way left cultures, cultural practices, and socialist cultural practices have kind of shaped themselves. They love writing manifestos, I guess. So finally, the Indian People's Theatre Association, and I love their tagline, People's Theatre stars the people. So that kind of resonates with the way how this organization was envisioning itself. That it stated in the first draft resolution, it was a people's theater movement with the aim of revitalizing both the stage and traditional art forms of India as part of people's struggle for economic justice, cultural progress, and freedom. So this is how, and this is where also middle class women, are mostly urban middle class women, start joining the socialist movement. So the ambition of the organization was reflected through the efforts in writing plays and performances on contemporary themes of famine, displacement, poverty, and people's struggle for freedom, translating the same play texts into different Indian languages to spread the message, performing for the mass audiences in villages, smaller towns, and working class areas of big cities, and maintaining a strict affiliation with the left political ideology and not to kind of associate themselves with the entertainment sector. So it is, it had to be understood through the ways in which culture and politics are interacting with themselves. But also let's remember that the middle class urban women who joined in this organization, who became part of the central cultural squad, they became not only very accomplished dancers and actors, but there remains a bit of a kind of space for debate that there have been some kind of later critique that women were not given enough space in the leadership of the Indian People's Theatre Association. Women themselves who were part of that, in their memory, in their memoirs, have actually spoken differently, and that actually allows us to think that it wasn't a blanket kind of patriarchal imposition that they had no freedom at all, or that they had complete freedom to do exactly whatever they needed. There, of course, was a need for a discipline in the way they performed. But of course, there remains a space to think that how women participated and what were they were dancers and they were actors, but were they also playwrights? And were they also directors? So these questions remain something that one maybe explore more and think through the voices that emerge, and that's where I will be kind of trying to arrive at by the end of it. So in the meantime, in 1942, when IPTA is being set up, let's remember that especially in the region of Bengal, there's a huge famine going on. It was entirely induced by the Second World War and the food procurement policy. 5 million people died in that famine. It wasn't a failure of crop. It was entirely the food procurement policy imposed by the colonial government to secure for the soldiers that were stationed to look after the Burma border, because the Japanese forces were almost invading. And so there are horror stories about hunger of 1942. And socialist women first started kind of coming together through relief work during the famine. And their first organization, Mahila Atmaraksha Samiti, Women's Self-Defense League, there are fantastic, political works that they engaged with also in terms of organizing this, leading hunger marches through the streets of Calcutta as people from all over Bengal were thronging for a morsel of food on the streets. The Tebhaga movement, again, a peasant movement started. So the women in the Self-Defense League kind of went into organizing the peasant movement, and it was actually a very interesting intersection again, where women from the rural areas and urban areas within the socialist movement could interact with each other. There was a Telangana movement, participated in different capacities to protest, which is basically the Hyderabad area where the Nizam Shahi had to be contested, and Telangana People's Movement became a very significant movement of that time. Now, to kind of come back to the history of the theater again, that given this context that women's activism within the socialist movement is functioning in a way, within IPTA, what women are doing is something that needs, that keeps us kind of in an open way to think about what their roles are. Within that context, if we start thinking about kind of what the late 19th century, early 20th century actresses coming from red light areas, and how these new generation of middle class women performers, but the crucial distinction being that they are clearly not trying to be part of the entertainment industry, which the earlier generation actresses were associated with. But IPTA creates a space for them to interact with each other, because many of these older generation actresses were also coming to join in certain plays. So, Prabha Devi belonged to the generation of professional actresses in the commercial stage who came from non-respectable families, but of course they gained certain kinds of respectability as they kind of went along, because that became very important and necessary, because the entire kind of environment of respectability around theater and actors' lives were changing by then. So Shobha Sen and Tripti Mitro, two extraordinarily gifted actresses of IPTA, who became iconic presence in post-colonial Bengali as well as Indian theater. Yes. Their educational qualifications, respectable parentage, families involved in professions like medicine and law, and desired commitment to the left political ideology constituted the first generation of middle-class actresses. So from the 1940s, as women in the amateur theater began to interact with actresses on the professional stage, they began to construct a language of camaraderie between social respectability and disrepute, which culminated in assertion of love for theater as its core politics. These interactions reveal how the shift in the biographies of theater actresses fundamentally transformed politics of women's presence on and off stage. Shobha Sen writes in her autobiography about her interactions with actresses from previous generation who came from the disreputable quarters of the city, but that didn't matter. The origin didn't matter. What mattered was respect and empathy. And this generational transfer of cultural practices also involved transfer of certain techniques of acting as well. And these kind of admissions and writings, this sense of camaraderie, continued with other actresses of the professional stage, even for the next generation. So Ketoki Dotto, who was the daughter of Prabha Devi, became also kind of in a familial way joined the theater, became very famous in her own way. And she tried to join the group theater, or in the socialist theater space that was created by IPTA, which became group theater later on, but she couldn't sustain herself because she said, and this is where I would like to kind of read out from what Ketaki Datta says. There are many who claim that this is their passion, not profession. But theater is my profession. Of course, it is my passion too. Otherwise, why can't I live without acting? There is passion, definitely. But along with them, I also am a theater professional. My family, their livelihood, depends on my earnings from theater. For that reason, I had to shift between commercial and non-commercial stage. Whereas K.R. Chakraborty, again one of the most celebrated actresses of group theatre, the socialist space, theatre space, wrote a satirical piece named Mrs. R.P. Sengupta in 1975. This is a 3-page piece, and this is where she kind of outlines, within 3 pages, she outlines the domestic labor that a woman has to do, whether she's an actress or a professional housewife. You know, the way that shapes the tension between domestic conjugality, respectability, and artistic passion. So this is precisely where I kind of go back to the slide that Elaine used in the first. So, you know, if we just kind of remind ourselves, you know, that the critique of patriarchy, the feminist revisions to rather than abandonment of socialist analysis of class and economic relations under capitalism, but rather critical attention to class, economics, and gender to explain and demand the revolutionary transformation of women's dual exploitation in home and workplace. So what I am kind of trying to do, if I just kind of skip this, and I'll come back to those slides. So Janet Leon, in her critical reading of the form of manifesto, argues that feminist speaking position is an analytical angle of looking at different forms of texts. Speaking positions act as a conceptual framework for looking into the gendered weavings of a genre. So extending Leon's argument, if we talk about feminist speaking positions emerging in relation to reading a movement, a play, a performance, or a literary text. So a socialist feminist speaking position that emerged through the works and lives of actresses, both in the commercial and non-commercial stage in the 1970s, has continued, albeit haltingly, into the contemporary times. And why haltingly? That's where, you know, I would like to kind of go back. That, see, if I do a triangulation between Shobha Sen, Ketaki Dotto, and Tripti Mitro, the 3 figures of actresses that I have been talking to, you know, this is a kind of, this became a bit cumbersome while I was trying to put together all the points, so I will just talk through it, that they, you know, there are dissonances inside the intersecting points of class, labor, and sexuality that all 3 actresses raise as part of the problems that they face, which fracture any seamless equivocal speaking position to form a manifesto. So it's not a seamless feminist speaking position that we can have. But, for example, Ketaki Dotto said that she lacked the support that Shobha Sen received in her personal life. Then Shobha Sen said that K.R. Chakraborty should never have left her day job as an academic, you know, teaching in a college, and became a kind of full-time, you know, theatre actress. So there are ways in which they are not basically, you know, only supporting each other. They have very concrete advices and critiques to offer as well. So the feminist speaking position is not just one, you know, kind of unified, you know, I love you and you love me back kind of position. So these differences within the speaking position helps in paying attention to the nuances of women's struggles. And that is precisely where caste and class and race, these you know, kind of grades of inequality may become significant for us to think the relationship between gender, patriarchy, and cultural politics, and how we look at them through these voices emerging from actors' lives on and off stage, both. By the end of 1970s, autonomous women's groups in different parts of the country, principally in metropolitan cities like Delhi, Bombay, and Calcutta, emerged. And these groups realized that women and larger people rallied around certain kinds of women's issues, the dowry death being one of the most significant ones in the late 1970s. Anuradha Kapoor, a feminist theatre director, and Maya Rao, a feminist performer, came together with feminist groups to create a play on dowry death in 1979. And this is also, kind of the feminist street play coming together along with women's autonomous movements. These autonomous groups, of course, had their kind of relations with the left political organizations, but they could also keenly feel that there is an entrenched patriarchal discrimination also within certain left organizations. And so that's a kind of critical and bitter dialogue that has been going on for last 40 years between socialists and feminists. And we can really draw from Elaine's suggestion today that what gets lost and whose loss and how that loss can be understood if we are trying to figure out this specific relationship between socialism and feminism, particularly party-based socialism and feminism. So, kind of coming to the question of the street theater and the feminist investment in street theater from the beginning of the women's autonomous movements, if you remember that there is renewed interest, public protest gestures after the Arab Spring, Black Lives Matter, Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street, and street theater as a form is also changing with the new forms of movements. It is transforming from longer dialogue-based plays to short performance-based gestures. And feminist articulations of this kind in public gestures is probably best exemplified by this particular, it's a very short video that we can play.
Maybe if you reduce that, then it comes.
I reduced it.
Side पर आया, you'll have to close it. The slide. बंद कर.
Okay.
ठीक है. अभी ठीक होगा. हाँ, now it's coming. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Que nos gusta por nacer y nuestro castigo es la violencia que ya ves. El Estado opresor es un macho violador. El Estado opresor es un macho violador.
Que por el hecho de ser mujeres, exigimos respeto por ser mujeres y la letra es eso, también es denunciar la complicidad de Carabineros de Chile.
Toda Latinoamérica tiene tasas de feminicidio altísimas, violencia enorme contra las mujeres, tasas de impunidad contra violadores, contra asesinos, contra desaparición femenina.
Right. So the gender, a kind of collective performance against a collective performance against gender violence, and how it became popular first starting in Chile in 2019. And this actually has been that, the song states the rapist is you, not me. It's not my body, my clothes, my gestures, which actually, kind of is a root of gender violence. It's the state, it's the police, it's the government, it's the minister. All of them are kind of implicated why gender violence happens. So there's a manner in which this rapist is you is changing the rape script, kind of taking away from, the shame from the sufferer, the survivor, to the perpetrator. And this is something which, somebody, who also does is Suzette Jordan, had been raped. And let's remember, Suzette Jordan was, unfortunately, she died a few years ago. An extraordinarily, incredibly brave woman. She was a Christian woman living in Calcutta, of Anglo-Indian origin, probably of Portuguese descent, who did not speak Bengali, but of course came from Bengal. So if one can actually have a Portuguese Bengali, then Suzette Jordan was one. Christian. Jordan said in different interviews that she had been humiliated by the police. And there are newspaper reports galore that state how she was humiliated. So her complaint was finally taken seriously after a senior woman officer takes interest into the Kolkata police began to head the investigation a couple of weeks later, and and this is where she speaks about changing the rape script. Oh, I have to close that, no? Right. So, just kind of prompts to think about how race, gender, class, sexuality come together before we end with the final video, which is from a 1963 film directed by Satyajit Ray called Mahanagar, the Big City. It's about a refugee working class woman who goes out, takes up a job as a saleswoman in a big industry, kind of in a big office. There she meets her colleagues, and she creates a new life for herself. But then it all comes to a huge big crisis and how she deals with it. And this is the last video, and just kind of remember after that the interactive session.
I brought these.
Sit down. I want to talk to you.
I don't want to hear another word from you.
Here, read this. Oh, what am I going to tell Bill? You saw me. You came to my house. You saw I was ill. No, he thinks I was having fun. The dirty, filthy-minded son of a...
আপনি এডিথকে কি বলেছেন? আপনি এডিথকে কি বলেছেন? আপনি ওকে অপমান করেছেন? ওর চরিত্র সম্বন্ধে কিছু?
আপনি ওই ফিরিঙ্গি মেয়েটার হয়ে আমার সঙ্গে ফাইট করতে এসেছেন?
কি বলেছেন আপনি এডিথকে?
অত উত্তেজিত হবেন না মিসেস মজুমদার।
আপনি ওকে অপমান করেননি?
করেছি কি না করেছি সে কথা বলতে তো আপনাকে আমি বাধ্য নই মিসেস মজুমদার।
আপনি ওর সম্বন্ধে কিছু না জেনে শুনে কিভাবে অপমান করলেন, ওকে ডিসমিস করলেন?
দেখুন মিসেস মজুমদার, আমার অফিসের কর্মচারীদের আমি কি বলি না বলি, কি করি না করি, দ্যাট ইজ মাই বিজনেস এন্ড মাইন অ্যালোন।
ইডিত আপনার কর্মচারী হতে পারে, কিন্তু আমি ওর সঙ্গে কাজ করেছি, 4 মাস ওর সঙ্গে কাজ করেছি। ও আমার বন্ধু, আমি ওকে জানি। আমি ওর বাড়িতে গিয়েছি, ওর যে অসুখ করেছিল সেটা আমি নিজের চোখে দেখে এসেছি।
মিস সিমন্স আপনার কিরকম বন্ধু তা আমি জানি না, কিন্তু ফিরিঙ্গি মেয়েদের সম্বন্ধে আপনার কতখানি জ্ঞান আছে এ প্রশ্ন আপনাকে আমি করতে পারি কি?
আর কোনো ফিরিঙ্গি মেয়েকে আমি জানি না, আমি ইডিতকে জানি। আর জেনেই বলছি, আপনি যে ওকে অপমান করেছেন সেটা মোটেই ডিজার্ভ করে না।
অপমান নয়, ও যা ডিজার্ভ করে আমি তাই করেছি। আমি যেদিন থেকে বুঝতে পেরেছি যে একজন বাঙালি মেয়ে অর্থাৎ আপনি, আমি যে আপনার কথা ভেবে ওকে ছাড়িয়ে দিচ্ছি এ কথাটা আপনি কেন বুঝতে পারছেন না? আমি যেদিন থেকে বুঝতে পেরেছি যে আপনি ওর কাজ চালিয়ে নিতে পারবেন সেদিনই ডিসাইড করেছি ওকে আমি রাখবো না। একদিন দায়ে পড়ে রেখেছিলাম, আর দায়ে মুক্ত হয়েছি তাই ছাড়িয়ে দিচ্ছি, ব্যাস সিম্পল। এ নিয়ে আপনি কেন মাথা ঘামাচ্ছেন? এটা আপনার কি লাভ হচ্ছে? এটা আপনার নিজের পজিশন, আপনি নিজের জিওপোর্টাইজ করছেন। ও আপনার জন্য এতখানি করতো, আপনার ওই ফিরিঙ্গি বন্ধু। আপনার মাথা একেবারে খারাপ হয়ে গেছে।
ওর চরিত্র সম্বন্ধে কিছু বলবার কোনো অধিকার আপনার নেই, বিশেষ করে সেটা যখন মিথ্যে। এটা অত্যন্ত অন্যায়, এটা ভুল।
মিসেস মজুমদার, আপনার ওই কথাগুলো টেবিলের এদিক থেকে বলা চলে, ওদিক থেকে নয়। আপনি একটু বাড়াবাড়ি করছেন।
আমার মনে হয় আপনার এডিতের কাছে ক্ষমা চাওয়া উচিত। আপনি রাজি আছেন? আপনি রাজি আছেন?
মিসেস মজুমদার, আপনি বুঝতে পারছেন না যে আই এম বিজি নাও। আপনি বুঝতে পারছেন না যে আপনার এই অ্যাটিটিউডের ফল কত সিরিয়াস হতে পারে।
আপনি ক্ষমা চাইবেন না?
বুঝতে পারছেন না যে আর যদি আপনার চাকরি যায় তাহলে
আমি খুব খুশি হব। এই নিন।
কি ওটা?
আমার রেজিগনেশন। ডেটটা পাল্টে দেবেন।
মিসেস মজুমদার,
আরতি, কি হয়েছে? হ্যাঁ, কি হয়েছে?
তুমি রাগ করো না, আমাকে ভুল বুঝো না। সবাই আমাকে ভুল বুঝবে জানি, তুমি আমাকে ভুল বুঝো না।
কিন্তু কি হয়েছে তোমার?
আমি চাকরি ছেড়ে দিয়েছি।
ছেড়ে দিয়েছো?
হিমাংশুবাবু এডিটকে ডিসমিস করলেন। এডিট কোনো দোষ করেনি, কিছু না জেনে না শুনে বিনা দোষে বিনা কারণে ওকে ছাড়িয়ে দিলেন। ও এখন বিয়েও করতে পারবে না। আমার এত খারাপ লাগলো, এত অন্যায় বলে মনে হলো যে আমি তুমি রাগ করেছ, আমি জানি তুমি রাগ করেছ। আমি কার কাছে যাব না?
আরতি, আরতি কেঁদো না আরতি, আমি রাগ করিনি। শোনো, রাগ আমি করিনি। এ ব্যাপারে তো চট করে খুশি হওয়া যায় না আরতি, তুমি তো আমাদের অবস্থা জানো।
জানি আমি ভুল করেছি।
না আরতি, ও কথা বলো না। আরতি শোনো, শোনো, তুমি অন্যায়ের প্রতিবাদ করেছো, সেটা কি ভুল? তুমি যা করেছো আমি তা করতে পারতাম না, আমার সাহসে কুল হতো না। রোজগারের তাগিদে আমরা ভীতু হয়ে গেছি আরতি, কিন্তু তুমি তো হওনি। এটা কি কম হলো? তোমার উপর আমি রাগ করবো, তুমি কি বলছো আরতি?
আমার ভয় করছে, ভীষণ ভয়।
কিসের ভয় আরতি? আমি তো রয়েছি তোমার পাশে।
তুমি আছো?
থাকবো না?
বড্ড দূরে সরে গিয়েছিলে তুমি, আর যেও না।
আরতি, তুমি কেঁদো না, এখন শক্ত হওয়ার সময়। ভেঙে পড়লে চলবে কি করে? কেঁদো না আরতি, আরতি।
এত বড় শহর, এত রকম চাকরি, দুজনের একজনও কি পাবো না একটা?
চেষ্টা তো করি, আমার বিশ্বাস দুজনেই পাবো।
জানো, আজ এত দূর দিন, কি আছে কপালে কিচ্ছু ঠিক নেই, তবু আমার ভালো লাগছে।
আর ভয় নেই তো?
দেখো,
চলো।
চলো।
Right. So keeping these 3 videos in mind, the last video as well, and the 3 ones, can we have a very quick round of discussion? You can go to a group discussion, or if you would like to raise your own points about it, that is entirely up to you. What would you like to do? Group discussion? Or, ask questions? Yes, I think, yes, let's do that. Whoever wants to share your responses.
I'll start with the last one and only one share. I think one line that stood out for me was in the quest for daily bread, we all become cowards. And I am happy that you are not a coward. The husband tells the wife. And I think that really shows a reality that's not changed even now, but that brings together both socialism and feminism. That she could be a good feminist, um, and the bite of, you know, having to feed herself or her family doesn't I mean, that's still paining, but she was able to do that, and that it brought out very well that there's always that pain, and that's because of capitalism. Like we are asked to be cowards because we have to pay our bills and have this job and all that. So yeah.
I thought that in all through your talk and the theater actresses and them negotiating and the videos, this whole idea of for women, whether like there may be a difference between the dignity of being a person and the respectability, but the material consequences of respectability are such that women are forced to care about it. The dignity is something else that but due to the gendered sort of the idea of respectability that is imposed on women, it becomes a more become which should be sort of available, but like when you spoke about the two generations of actresses, their craft is their craft. There's nothing, I mean, and they are very curious about it. They may love it, they've been doing it for decades, but the idea of respectability that is imposed, I'm not talking about dignity, but that social morality or
Yeah. There's a difference between, of course they had respect and empathy for each other, but the question is not respect, but respectability around.
And even in last thesis, that whole rapist is you. This idea of the material consequences of due to the lack of it or due to having it, that becomes a very important reason for their circulation. Even in the last video, the idea of her friend is losing hers, so she wants to take a stand by not playing in that game.
I think the word was like translated as Anglo-Indian there, but the Bengali word that is Firingi is like it's a derogatory word, and it's very easy for him to address the Anglo-Indian woman as Firingi. Like he could have fired her in other giving other excuse, but he didn't do that. He just made her a Firingi. ওই ফিরিঙ্গি মেটার জন্য তুমি কেন ভাবছো? So it's because of you that I am firing her. You were like becoming friend with that Firingi me. That's what I wanted to.
I also wanted to talk on that point actually, that how certain bodies are more sexualized, or how race or ethnicity comes into play at the intersection of gender. And with the real life incident of Suzette also, when this was going on in the media, she was hyper sexualized, even her presence, her visibility in that sense. And here also the respectability for this Bengali woman and the so-called outsider to that society, the Anglo-Indian woman, it's different. I mean, that code of morality then becomes different, and immediately how you see that. Also, I was thinking a different aspect that when we see Suzette on this show, especially on this kind of a platform, then people are listening to her and kind of clapping. But when to think of society, the same people would be watching this and thinking that, oh, she was brave and what she has done when she's talking about this in retrospect. Whereas when this was all going on in the media, then she also faced these kind of things on the street. So then what does it say that when somebody has, when we see her as a victim and when she has overcome that situation, then she's shown in a different light. And especially in this kind of a reality show, kind of, not reality show, I mean this kind of a platform, really. Yeah.
Yeah, the scripted environment where she is kind of making her statement. But I couldn't get a good footage of the television interview which I remember watching it, where she actually came to speak with her face covered, but then as she started speaking, she just moved forward and moved towards the light, saying that I don't want to keep my face hiding anymore. And probably that wasn't, I don't think that the television anchors are that good actors. The look on the face of the anchor who was doing that interview kind of gives it away that it may not be entirely scripted. Yeah. But I couldn't get a good footage of that. Yeah. Any other?
So I'd focus on the interview bit wherein we see a small clip from this episode in Satyamev Jayate. I remember seeing the whole episode as well, but of course it's a distant memory now. But increasingly, growing up, I have realized that such episodes don't actually really help much, because I remember Oprah Winfrey talking about this in one of her interviews, that when she opened about her experiences as growing up, because she was raped at a very young age, and she could achieve so much later in life, of course, she made this very poignant remark that people see my case as one like people see that, oh, despite that fact she made it, as if this was just one single event, like someone with a disability of walking still could run a race. It's not just a single isolated event. What Winfrey tries to make the point that she's trying to make is that such televised, episodized events are, just that. It's just one single event, and they are only received as that one event or one event in life. So people are never actually able to extrapolate or think more and trying to understand that it's not just this one person who's able to recite this one event from her life as, oh, I was sick as well, I was this and that. But this is so prevalent, and this is only Oprah Winfrey, who's one of the few people who could now come up and be on such a pedestal where she can really say something and she may be taken seriously. But again, of course, in that format, for how long is this taken seriously is, I think, very short-lived. And this is what, again, she was also very afraid about, that, this maybe me telling everyone about my story, of course, it touches people, it does have some effect on them, but I don't know to what extent, or does it have any larger effect at all or not?
Coming to, hello. So I was just trying to link the three videos. First you started with giving us a history of a revolution of women's movement, socialism and activism, and women on stage, with these two other, the film clip and whatever. So one thing that I saw in common is the idea of shaming and morality, judging women has not changed. Earlier, the stage actresses came from a certain class and caste and position, the sex workers, or they were doing both acting and then later on middle class respectable family, the girls from those families started to go, so it was like better and okay or more acceptable. But when instances of like that, the Anglo-Indian getting chucked out of a job because she's an Anglo-Indian, or the Anglo-Indian getting raped because whatever, so the trauma that she goes through is like so not just real, but you begin to feel, will it ever change? You know, even today, 21st century, whatever century, you know, seriously, people are just talking in a certain way, or anybody, it's her individual struggle to emerge from it. Some just don't, are not able to, or some live with it. They're traumatized. Very few can, I think, reach that stage where they really come out of it and can face the world, you know. But it's like, it's just there.
Just to say that I agree with you that, and also kind of share some bit of the despair, will it ever change? But also just to think about that with every renewed spate of women's movement, I guess, I don't know, maybe inches are gained, perhaps, that at least, say, for example, the kinds of mobilizations that have happened after the 2012 Delhi gang rape, there's a new lease of life in the way feminism, women's movement, gender politics, different kinds of associations with socialism or liberalism, those engagements have re-emerged in certain ways. So I don't know. I would like to be a bit more positive person. Optimist.
Except that, you know, in the classroom, and I just wanted to share this. So we recently screened Lapata Ladies, and when I went back to the class, I had this boy quipping, why do we need women's empowerment? They're already empowered. You know, why are we talking about it?
That is
It's a
going on for last
debate.
50 years, yeah.
So yes, there is a struggle, and yes, we are fighting back, definitely.